Imagine building a city where no city should exist, where winter temperatures plunge to minus 50 degrees Celsius, where the sun disappears for 2 months every year, leaving only polar night, where the nearest civilization lies 400 kilometers away across frozen tundra. Now imagine doing it with prisoners. This is the story of the city built by the Soviet that shouldn't exist. This is Blueprint. The year is 1935. Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union is racing to industrialize, to transform an agrarian empire into a global superpower within a single generation. The state needs metals: copper, nickel, platinum, palladium, the raw materials of modernity, and Soviet geologists have found them, buried beneath the permafrost of the Taimyr Peninsula, in one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. The deposits are staggering. An estimated 20% of the world's nickel reserves lie frozen in this remote corner of Siberia. For Stalin, the calculus is simple: extract these resources at any cost. The fact that no human settlement has ever existed here, that temperatures make outdoor work lethal for much of the year, that supply chains would stretch across thousands of kilometers of wilderness, these are merely obstacles to be overcome through Soviet willpower. But who will build this impossible city? Who will work the mines when conditions make survival itself a daily struggle? The answer arrives in the form of a decree. The Nurilag labor camp is established under the Soviet secret police, the NKVD. It will become one of the largest camps in the Gulag system, eventually holding nearly 100,000 prisoners at its peak. These are political prisoners, alleged enemies of the state, swept up in Stalin's purges. Scientists, engineers, intellectuals, peasants who resisted collectivization, entire ethnic groups deemed unreliable. Their sentences: 10 years, 25 years, or simply until the work is done. The first groups arrive in the summer of 1935, transported by ship up the Yenisei River and then overland. They step off the boats into a landscape that seems designed to reject human presence. Swampy tundra stretches in every direction. Clouds of mosquitoes descend in biblical swarms during the brief summer months. Winter brings winds that can knock a person off their feet, cold so severe that metal shatters. That breath crystallizes instantly into ice fog. There is nothing here. No buildings, no roads, no infrastructure. Just the land and the prisoners who will reshape it. They begin with their hands and basic tools. The first shelters are dugouts carved into hillsides, covered with whatever materials can be scavenged. Canvas tents that offer almost no protection from the wind. The prisoners sleep packed together for warmth, sometimes 10 or 12, to a space meant for 4. The work begins immediately. Mining operations start at the Norilsk deposit, where prisoners dig into frozen ground with pickaxe and shovels. The permafrost is like concrete. Every swing of the pickaxe sends shock waves up the arm. Progress is measured in centimeters per day. Guards stand watch with rifles, though escape is essentially impossible. Where would you go? The nearest settlement is hundreds of kilometers away, and the wilderness will kill an unprepared person within hours. Winter arrives, and with it, a test of human endurance that defies comprehension. Temperatures drop below minus 40 degrees Celsius regularly, sometimes reaching minus 55. At these temperatures, exposed skin freezes within minutes. Breathing becomes painful as the cold sears lung tissue. Equipment fails constantly. Machinery won't start. Steel becomes brittle and breaks. Diesel fuel gels into uselessness. Yet the prisoners continue working. They must. Work quotas are mandatory. Failure to meet them means reduced food rations, and reduced rations mean death. It becomes a grim equation. Work despite frostbite, despite exhaustion, despite illness, or starve. Many choose to work sick rather than report to the medical barracks, because a sick prisoner receives even less food than a healthy one who fails their quota. The death rate is catastrophic. Estimates suggest that between 1935 and 1956, at least 17,000 prisoners died in Nurilag, though the true number may be far higher. Some freeze to death during the work shifts. Others succumb to malnutrition, to pneumonia, to accidents in the mines. There is scurvy from lack of fresh food, tuberculosis spreading through crowded barracks, injuries from mining operations conducted without adequate safety measures. Bodies are buried in mass graves in the permafrost, preserved perfectly by the cold. Yet somehow, impossibly, the city rises. By 1939, the first buildings of permanent settlement begin to appear. The Norilsk mining and metallurgical combinat, the industrial complex at the heart of the operation, starts producing metals. Smelters are built to process the ore, their smokestacks beginning the pollution that will eventually make Norilsk one of the most contaminated places on Earth. The prisoners construct everything. They lay foundations on permafrost, using a technique that will define Arctic construction. Buildings are raised on stilts, allowing cold air to circulate underneath and preventing the heat from the structures from melting the frozen ground. They build roads, power plants, water systems. They construct the Nadezhda smelter, the copper plant, the administrative buildings. Among the workforce are geologists, engineers, architects, professionals who were imprisoned for political reasons, but whose skills make them invaluable. They design the city's layout, adapting construction techniques for Arctic conditions, solving problems that have never been solved before. The irony is bitter. They are building the instrument of their own captivity, creating permanent infrastructure for a system that has destroyed their lives. By the mid-1940s, Norilsk has transformed from a labor camp into something more complex, a hybrid settlement where prisoners work alongside a growing population of free workers. The Soviet state begins recruiting civilians with promises of higher wages and benefits for those willing to relocate to the Arctic. The city is officially founded in 1953, though it has existed as a working settlement for nearly 20 years by then. The smelters operate around the clock. Ore extracted from mines is processed continuously, filling the Arctic air with sulfur dioxide and heavy metals. The sky takes on strange colors, yellows and browns and grays that have nothing to do with weather. Snow near the industrial complex turns black. Vegetation for kilometers around the smelters dies, leaving moonscape zones of barren rock. Production increases year after year. Norilsk becomes crucial to the Soviet economy, supplying metals for weapons, for industry, for the space program. The city that shouldn't exist becomes indispensable. Stalin dies in 1953. The Gulag system begins to dissolve, though not immediately. Prisoners in Nurilag hear rumors of amnesties, of releases. Some refuse to believe it. They have been told too many lies before, but gradually, incredibly, it happens. Prisoners are freed, given papers, and faced with an impossible choice: leave the Arctic for an uncertain future elsewhere in the Soviet Union or stay in Norilsk as free workers. Many stay. After years, sometimes decades, in the camps, they have no homes to return to. Family members may have disowned them to avoid political contamination. Their former cities may be closed to them as ex-prisoners. And strangely, Norilsk offers something: work, wages, a community of others who understand what they have survived. The city of their imprisonment becomes their home. Norilsk evolves. The Soviet state invests heavily in making the city livable, partly to attract free workers, partly as a showcase of Soviet mastery over nature. Apartment blocks rise, built in the standard Soviet style, but adapted for Arctic conditions. Thick walls, triple glazed windows, enclosed corridors connecting buildings so residents can move between structures without going outside during the worst weather. The city develops its own culture. Schools, hospitals, theaters, sports facilities appear. There is a mining institute to train engineers, libraries and community centers. The city even has its own newspaper. Life takes on a peculiar normalcy. Children are born and raised here, knowing no other home. Families celebrate holidays, attend school plays, complain about work and weather like people anywhere. But they darkness is never far away. The polar night descends every winter, lasting from late November through mid-January. For 2 months, the sun never rises above the horizon. The psychological impact is profound. Depression rates soar, alcoholism becomes endemic, suicide rates climb. The human body was not designed for this absence of light. Vitamin D deficiency affects almost everyone. Seasonal affective disorder is not an occasional condition, but a collective experience, and the pollution grows worse. The smelters continue operating at full capacity throughout the Cold War. Environmental regulations, minimal as they are in the Soviet Union, barely exist in Norilsk. By the 1980s, the city releases more than 2 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere annually. Heavy metals, nickel, copper, cobalt, lead, contaminate the soil, the water, the air. Cancer rates rise, respiratory diseases become common. Life expectancy in Norilsk is significantly lower than the Soviet average. Yet people persist. There is a fierce pride among many residents, a sense of having conquered impossible conditions. They have built something substantial in the Arctic, created a functioning city where there should be only wilderness. The hardships become sources of identity. To survive Norilsk is to be tough, resilient, special. The Soviet Union collapses in 1991, and Norilsk faces a new crisis. Relevance. The Russian Federation that emerges from the Soviet wreckage has no ideological need for a city in the Arctic. Market economics question whether Norilsk makes financial sense. Why maintain a city of 175,000 people in such a remote, expensive location? The answer, as it was 70 years earlier, is the metals. The deposits are too valuable to abandon. Norilsk Nickel, the company that emerges from the Soviet industrial complex, becomes one of the world's largest producers of palladium and nickel. The city continues, now as a corporate town rather than a state project, but the essential relationship remains. The city exists to extract resources, and the people exist to operate the extraction. In 2001, the Russian government officially acknowledges what residents have known for decades. Norilsk is a zone of ecological disaster. The pollution has created a dead zone spanning nearly 100 square kilometers around the smelters where nothing grows. The soil is so contaminated that it cannot support plant life. The rivers run orange with chemical runoff. Atmospheric concentrations of sulfur dioxide regularly exceed safe levels by factors of 10 or more. The company begins modest cleanup efforts, more from international pressure than local concerns. Russia is trying to attract foreign investment, and Norilsk's environmental record is an embarrassment. Some of the oldest, dirtiest smelters are modernized or closed. Emissions decrease from their catastrophic peaks, though they remain among the highest of any city on Earth. Then, in May 2020, disaster strikes again. A fuel storage tank at a power plant collapses, releasing 21,000 tons of diesel fuel into the Ambarnaya River. The spill spreads across 350 square kilometers, turning rivers red and contaminating waterways that flow into the Arctic Ocean. Russian President Vladimir Putin declares a state of emergency. It becomes one of the largest industrial accidents in modern Russian history, revealing that infrastructure built decades earlier on permafrost has been undermined by climate change. The permafrost itself is thawing, causing ground subsidence and structural failure. Climate change presents Norilsk with a bitter paradox. The city was built on ground that was permanently frozen. Now that ground is melting. Buildings begin to crack and list as their foundations shift. Water pipes burst. Roads develop sinkholes. The very conditions that made construction so difficult, the permafrost, also made it possible by providing a stable foundation. Remove that stability and the entire city faces potential collapse. Yet today, as of 2025, Norilsk endures. The population has declined to about 175,000. down from its Cold War peak, but the city functions. New generations are born here. The internet has arrived, connecting Norilsk to the global world. The young people grow up watching the same videos, playing the same games, following the same trends as youth anywhere. But they do it in a city where going outside in winter can kill you. There is a museum in Norilsk, modest and not widely advertised, that documents the Gulag era, photographs of early prisoners, documents from the camps, artifacts from the construction period. It exists in a city where many residents are descended from those prisoners, where the apartment buildings they live in may stand on land cleared by forced labor, where the entire infrastructure of their lives was built by the condemned. How do you reconcile that history? How do you live in a city where the foundations were laid by suffering? Some residents argue that dwelling on the past serves no purpose. The prisoners are gone. The Soviet Union is gone. What matters is the present, the jobs, the community, the life they've built. Others insist that forgetting is complicity, that the dead deserve to be remembered, that the truth of how Norilsk was created must be acknowledged. The questions extend beyond Norilsk. The metals extracted here are global commodities. The nickel in stainless steel, the palladium in catalytic converters, the platinum in electronics. These materials flow into supply chains that stretch around the world. The smartphone in your pocket may contain metals from Norilsk. The car you drive, the medical equipment that saves lives, all potentially connected to this remote Arctic city. Are we complicit in this history when we benefit from resources extracted at such human cost? Does the distance absolve us? If the system that built Norilsk with slave labor is gone, does using its products still matter? Norilsk represents humanity's capacity for both marvel and monstrosity. It demonstrates what we can accomplish when we decide no obstacle is insurmountable. A functioning city of nearly 200,000 people in conditions that should prohibit human settlement. It also demonstrates what we're willing to sacrifice for that accomplishment. The lives, the health, the freedom of those who built it. The city continues. Children play in snow that contains trace amounts of heavy metals. Workers report to the same smelters their grandparents worked in, though now as paid employees rather than prisoners. The Arctic winter still descends, still plunges the city into months of darkness, still tests the limits of human endurance, and through it all, the mines remain open. The smelters continue operating. The metals flow outward to fuel global industry. Norilsk is a monument to human stubbornness, a testament to our refusal to accept natural limits. It is also a memorial to those who died building it, whose names are mostly lost, whose graves lie frozen in the permafrost. It is the city at the end of the world, built by the forgotten, sustained by pollution, existing because we decided it must. And it asks us across the Arctic darkness, across the decades since its founding, what are we willing to destroy to build what we desire? Who pays the true cost of progress? And when we benefit from systems built on suffering, what does that make us? The answers are not simple. They never are. But in Norilsk, under the midnight sun of summer, or the endless night of winter, those questions echo with particular force. Because here you cannot escape the evidence. The city itself is the argument, the proof, the permanent reminder of what humans will do and what humans will endure. And still, despite everything, people call it home.